All right, so Mackenzie Dern and Angela Hill. I have a lot of thoughts on this fight, and I have more thoughts because of this last week of media from Dern about this fight. I mean, where should I begin? Let's start with this. Angela Hill, in my opinion, has never been given her due. But that girl has been around. She has improved leaps and bounds over other people that started in the same era that she did. She's outlasted most of them. I mean, she's one of the few remaining survivors from that era. Oh, by the way, she's worked her way to main event status. But if you go look at the skills that she had, you could tell she was tough, and you could tell she was athletic, and you could even give her a little bit of a bump in the world of promotion because she's very charismatic. But that is, when she burst on the scene, as much as you could say about Angela Hill. That's not true anymore. I mean, she's gone leaps and bounds, and I do have to go back to this main event. The way that she dealt with that, Angela's very good with the striking. She doesn't want to be on the ground with one of the best grapplers in the world. Or at least not years ago when Angela burst onto the scene. Tonight, she get in there with a jiu-jitsu ace, and she really wasn't sweating it, not to mention 5 rounds. I mean, you're talking about championship rounds. You know how good you have to be? You know the faith that you have to have in yourself, going out doing the media and saying something is very different from being in the 5-round club. In a main event on the worldwide leader against the ace of the discipline that you're not as polished at, which is groundwork. I mean, I'm just saying, like, Angela really built off a lot, and she's done it a number of times. She's extremely exciting. She puts everything out there. She believes in herself, and I don't think we give her enough credit. I really don't. Hold that thought. Because there's an old expression that many of you won't subscribe to. Many of you think it's just what, like, a coach tells a young kid to get him to not be down in the dumps after a loss, which is your greatest victory will come in defeat. But it's so true. I mean, in many ways, I thought this was Angela Hill's best night. In many ways, I really did. I think she overcame a lot, not just the main event, not just the 5-round club, but going in there against Mackenzie, who is as skilled in the element that at one point in Angela's career, you could have called her weakness. I just thought she did an awesome job. I realized this was mainly a stand-up fight, but now let's take a look at Mackenzie. So, you guys have seen those things on the internet where they go out and they expose a fake black belt. Like some jiu-jitsu guy goes around to different gyms. It's like a stolen valor. You've seen that with military men, stolen valor. They do the same thing with these fake black belts. I used to be a fake black belt. And that is so bad. Like, that is so, as a current black belt, it took me 20 years under Fabiano Scherner to get it. I respect it and I view it very differently, but at one point in my life, I was told by a guy that you're whatever belt you claim to be. And his reasoning was that when you go into competitions, whatever belt you claim to be, that's the group you're going to be taking on. So if you walk into a competition, you put your entry fee down, and you're tough enough to say, I'm a black belt, put me up there with black belts, then you are a black belt. Now, I was 18 years old when this was told to me, and maybe a little bit naive, because Mark Schultz, who told me that, doesn't totally stand by that. He's kind of like, well, Chael, there's a little misunderstanding you had with that story. Now, I only share that because I leave Utah, right? Mark Schultz, Pedro Sauer's gym's there. Walt Bayless was around. Pretty good little hotbed. I go to Eugene. And I'm in Eugene. I go into a boxing club. Hard Knock Boxing, but Hard Knocks Boxing has a class 2 days a week that's jiu-jitsu. And almost nobody took it. I mean, there's like 5 or 6 guys that did it, but it was ran by Ryan Kelly and Harold Utterback. And those guys, they both had a blue belt. And that might mean purple. Right? The system, I think. Purple. But that was really high for our area. Like, you would think of now, you would never think of somebody running a gym or being a head instructor that was anything less than a black belt, right? Well, at this time in the country, there was only 6 Gracie certified black belts in all of America. So if you've got a purple belt, which Ryan Kelly and Harold Utterback did, yeah, you could go run in class, and they did. And I went and checked in on the class one day. When you're filling out your paperwork, you kind of say what your background was, and I said, well, I'm a black belt in jiu-jitsu. So they see it on the paperwork, and they say, well, why don't you come work out with us? We'd sure love to learn from you. Very respectful. They treated me the way that you would treat a black belt, but they're taking a look at me and they're knowing the stats that there's only 6 in all of America and I'm 18 years old, right? So these guys, man, they give me a lesson, right? When I leave that day, I don't still think I'm a black belt, all right? Which I think was their mission. They accomplished the mission. Now, the reason I bring that story up isn't just to tease myself. What they were doing to train is every other weekend, so twice a month, and they had a sponsor. This guy named Joe was sponsoring them, but he would fly them out to Arizona, and they'd spend a long weekend, 3 days, fly back home. They spent a long weekend on the mats with a guy named Megaton Wellington. To this day, I don't know Megaton's real name. If I see him or I see pictures of him or I speak of him, I call him Megaton. And he was only like 160 pounds, but when he was on top of you, he felt like a megaton. And these guys would vouch for it. They'd say he'd get on top, you could not move. He would freeze you in position. Mark Kerr was a huge name back then. And they were convinced that if he could get Mark to that position, that he could hold Mark down. I'm not proclaiming he could. I'm just proclaiming for you the guy had a very good reputation. Well, Wellington Megaton is Mackenzie Dern's father. And, that's pretty helpful, right? Look at Floyd Mayweather just as an example. When you're that second generation guy, when your coach and your trainer lives across the hall, when you can move the coffee table out of the way and get a session in at 5 years old, at 8 years old, it's just a really helpful thing. So when I look at Mackenzie Dern, you want to know how good she is, or you wonder why is she so good? I mean, everything that I said about Angela Hill and the leaps and the bounds that she came, the 5-5 round club, all the things that I bragged about her for, I got to give those same compliments to Mackenzie Dern. And then even if you look tonight, as much as Angela was accepting of perhaps having to go to ground with the biggest ace in that division, possibly the biggest ace for that entire gender, well, Mackenzie was willing to stand up with Angela Hill. I've got to give her that same comp. I just thought it was a great fight, but it was more than just a fight. I want you to really be able to appreciate and see. Mackenzie Dern did an interview this week. She talked about how stressful her life has been, talked about a divorce. That's heavy stuff. I'll leave it at that. But could you even imagine having to go through training camp? Being a mother, going through a divorce, and training camps in a different state with Coach Pearl. I mean, there's a lot on it. To go out there, to make weight, to be able to perform, to show up, let alone to get your hand raised. Those girls, and I do mean both of them, deserve a lot of credit.